Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Mouthy Money podcast. This week, my typical co-host Chris is away, unfortunately, so it's just me running the show today. Fortunately, though, I've managed to get together two guests for a very specific reason. I'm joined today by Mark Wilson and Paul Grant. Mark and Paul, good morning. Hello.
Hi, how you doing,
Good
Edmund?
morning.
So Mark and Paul have joined me today for a fairly specific reason, but we're going to kind of dig into a whole a series of different things around the topic. But basically, Mark and Paul have got together to write a book called Money Remixed, which is looking at kind of steps to establishing a wealthy mindset. Is that a kind of in a nutshell? My kind of description there's very short, but is that basically what it's about?
Yeah, we got together to follow up my original book, Life Remixed, which was about my
Okay.
journey of recovering from disease and bankruptcy, and wanting to help other people not go through those kind of journeys. Paul and I have known each other for many years now, but we got together. We started to be on Zoom calls together. We're in separate countries, but we started to get to a point where we're like, actually, we can really work together here on a few ideas, which we started to. And then I suggested, why don't we co-author a book about money? Because of reasons that will become clear, but certainly through my coaching, through the Life Remix coaching, I've realized that people have some huge hang-ups about money. And Paul and I had some really open discussions about business, about money. We have similar mindsets, so they're very different approaches, which will also become clear. Um, but we decided to co-author a book, right, Paul?
Absolutely.
Mhm. So let's, before we kind of really dive into the detail on what's in the book and some of the kind of the kind of the inspiration in it. Tell us, let's learn bit more about both of you and your kind of backgrounds. Paul, let's start with you. Tell us about yourself, kind of what your kind of professional background is, and all that sort of good stuff.
Certainly. So I went to Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh and studied civil engineering and graduated way back in 1990 with a first class honours degree. So I joined BP as a drilling engineer and worked for them for a couple of years, and then was offered a position with a company called Schlumberger, SLB. So I worked with Schlumberger as as a drilling engineer, as a rig manager, as a division manager. At that stage, the company that was part of Schlumberger called Sedco Forex was merged with a company called Transocean. So I then went to Houston as the director of compensation and benefits. I went to South America, back to Houston as the acting vice president of HR, and then over to Jakarta, where I was the marketing manager for Asia, Pacific, and Australasia. And that was back in 2004. And I decided it was time to do something different. So we started several companies, one of which was Equilibria, that's a coaching company that's still going strong. And then we started up several other companies that are all sort of mentioned in the book, and that was really my starting point of looking at the issues of building wealth and how to go about it and maintain it.
And that's very much kind of your the experience you're bringing to the book is very much that kind of successful business background. Um, I mean, it sounds like you've had a quite an interesting and varied career, especially, and you've been around the world, which I think is quite, well, certainly not, not typical. And I think that comes through in the book, definitely. Mark, moving to you, your career has been slightly different to that. If is that fair to say? Slightly
Slightly
different to
different is
Paul's.
one way of describing it, but yeah, for sure.
So
Uh,
tell us about that. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very different, very different. And yet, I think Paul and I have a mutual interest in each other's journeys. I've always been fascinated by what he's done traveling globally, working in the energy business, and I know he's observed and watched and read Life Remixed and got interested in my journey and what I've done and the way that I sort of bring people together and help people. So I've also traveled globally. I've been to 65 countries around the globe. I've DJ'd in most of them. And I became resident DJ at Ministry of Sound after hearing music when I was 6 years old, hearing Elvis and the Beatles on my mum's stereo. And I just got moved by music, and music was just such a big part of my life. And I managed to find a way to make money at it. I travelled the globe, like I said, played in all the major clubs globally, and had a wonderful time for about 15, probably 16 years. Yeah, oblivious really, just having a good time as a young man and just having a good time. I'd never thought about wealth or wealth building or anything like that. I was, if you like, probably just surviving as an artist, but getting by and having a good time also. But that also came with a lot of stress and a lot of challenges as well. And then after being that sort of international successful DJ, I made a top 10 record with Lou Reed and David Bowie called Satellite of Love, which was also a really great moment in my career 21 years ago now. Anyway, and so I then collapsed one day, and I couldn't get up off the floor. My leg gave way, and that was the start of 18 months of absolute hell. My health failed me. People have said to me that you've got 100 problems in the world, but if your health goes, you've got one problem. And I did have one problem. My health had gone, and there was moments where my mental health was in question. I was spiraling downwards. Even suicidal thoughts and things like that. Not pretty, not good. Um, and off the back of all of that, I also ended up bankrupt. So, as you can imagine, it was a really tough time in my 30s. But I decided if I could bounce back and remix my own life and actually make something, good happen, that I would write a book about it. And I did. It took me 10 years to do it, but I wrote this book called Life Remixed. And as I say, that's been successful. It's helped a lot of people globally. And it's actually brought Paul and I close together to co-author Money Remixed and more books coming. So it's all part of a journey for us in order to be able to help people. So the equilibrium and the e-colors that Paul just mentioned have had a huge, profound effect on me, understanding my strengths, my potential limiters, and then how I best can earn money and what I can do with that is all part of the journey and part of the process, and why we co-authored the book.
So turning to the book, what is the? I mean, I think the it's fair to say the premise centers on wealth, but it's about. And tell me if I'm wrong here. It's about changing mindset towards wealth and how you think and approach it before you even go about actually trying to make money. Is that fair? Is that a kind of you know talk us through that?
Yeah, so it's very much about a wealthy mindset, and a wealthy mindset is a set of beliefs, attitudes, and habits, that are conducive towards achieving your purposes in life. So, it involves adopting a positive and proactive approach towards life, and with a focus on creating value. It's important to know it's not, a wealthy mindset is not solely about accumulating financial wealth, but more about how you approach life, with financial wealth being one of the outcomes.
Yeah, yeah. Now, Mark has mentioned to us before we had this chat that Paul, you were slightly reticent about writing a book about money, but he managed to convince you to do it. So what's going on there? What was that conversation like? What happened?
Yeah, when Mark said that, why don't you write a book? My initial thoughts were, well, I don't think anyone's really going to be interested to read it. But obviously, Mark gave me some convincing arguments that I had a story to tell, and it could really help people out there in terms of building wealth and retaining wealth. So yeah, the here we are now.
I think that's a really important point, and that kind of the nub of the issue, and part of what we try and talk about a lot is that um, wealth seems to have, particularly in the UK, I think perhaps less than somewhere like in the US, where I think wealth is more celebrated, perhaps. Um, in the UK we get very shy about money. We find talking about wealth and creating wealth and that thing quite awkward. There's almost a social I don't know what the right word for it is, but there's almost like a stigma attached in a way to kind of, you know, showing anything like being a, you know, and you get the kind of the Del Boy connotations of, oh, he's just, you know, a Del Boy out to make a bit of money type thing. And do you think there's a problem with the mindset? And I mean, this question's for both of you, I guess, but you know, do we have a mindset issue in the UK?
I would suggest that it's a global thing, not just the UK actually. But from my coaching clients and the people that I've worked with in the last sort of 5 years, one of the biggest challenges they find, or I find, is their belief systems around money. They get really challenged by, you know, trying to understand themselves and their finances, let alone knowing themselves and knowing their strengths and where they play out. You know, that was one of my drivers for writing this book because, you know, when I observe my coaching clients, some of them struggle, you know, really struggle with this for a long time. You know, I do 12 months of coaching minimum with people. And it, you know, it can really afflict their lives and cause them all kinds of problems. And I personally know what it's like to have nothing. And I also know what it's like to have plenty. And I know which I prefer. So therefore, you know, I think Paul and I said it was almost like a moral obligation to share what's worked for us so that other people can read it and then, you know, apply it to their own lives. I think money gets a bit of a bad rap, you know. There's all kinds of negativity, isn't there, you know, around rich people have just like ripped someone off, or you know, money's a bad thing, and let's be honest, you know, in the wrong hands, money can be quite a, you know, used to control people and quite a negative thing. And that's, if those experiences happen to people, they get that belief and then they pass that on through their generations of their family. And lo and behold, here we are, someone struggling with their beliefs around money. So, you know, I would say that money makes you more of what you already are. If you're a good person, you can be an incredible person with money, you know. Equal concept the other way, you know, if you're a bad person, you get a lot of money, you can be an incredibly bad person. But yeah, the key point is self-development. You know, this is where Paul and I really connect around coaching, helping other people grow is such an important point, to get to that point where you are a good person, living in your strengths, being happy with yourself and your own life and what you do and how you earn money, and then making sure that you keep it, invest it, and you take care of the future. So all of that goes together around creating positive beliefs, and that's what the book's about.
And I think I mean, there's an important distinction here as well, isn't it? It's not about creating or turning yourself into a billionaire robber baron kind of, you know, with a business empire and this kind of thing. It's about how do you create a situation where you can lead a happy life. Money provides, you know, tools to enable that for you. It's about retiring comfortably, not being reliant on things like the state, which is something we've talked about a lot, particularly with things like state pension and that kind of thing, and the fact that it's a system that we're not going to be able to rely on long term and that kind of thing. Is it for you guys? Is this more about that? Like, you know, how do we help people have sustainable lives and you know, comfort in retirement?
I've got a couple of bits on that, and I'd really like Paul to come in as well. But the bit I would suggest is that money is a tool to get you where you want to get to in life. People pay for ideas. You know, if you're not having great ideas, then, you know, you're not really giving yourself a great opportunity. And the other thing is around retirement. You know, retirement is what you want it to be. I heard Michael Jordan say retirement is, you know, giving up what you don't want to do so you can do what you do want to do. And, you know, if that's the case, I retired when I was 18, when I became a DJ. So the key point is to, you know, do what you would like to do with your life. But as Paul's going to point out, it's very important to make sure that you've got the wealth, you know, where you need it.
And I think a lot of it comes back to the narrative about money. You know, when I went to school, it was a case of, you know, money wasn't really a subject that was taught in school, but the standard narrative was you work hard, you get good grades, you go to college or university, you get a degree, you get a job, and then you retire. And that was pretty much the narrative about money. But we know from our experiences, it's a lot more than that. And it's as you've said there, relying on the government to provide you, money for your financial retirement. Eventually that house of cards could come tumbling down, and you really have to think for yourself now.
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, that kind of that narrative, it does already seem quite old-fashioned, but particularly now in 2025, like how challenged is that? Particularly for younger people who look at what's going on in the world today, be it kind of geopolitical dislocation and kind of the chaos caused by, things that are going on in the US and all this kind of stuff. Is there hope to be taken? Can we find a positive way of looking at what's going on in the world and moving forward and just not having despair? I don't know. I think, what do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I have some great thoughts about that. I mean, I'm eternally optimistic. Yeah, I think that, a lot of what we get pumped from the news and the media and stuff like that can be very, very negative. It's all about fear, isn't it? A lot of the time. From my perspective, I think it's very important to keep myself correct and all the people around me correct, add value. As Paul was saying earlier, one of the big things I got taught by Bob Proctor, who was, like a big self-development guy, you can see over my shoulder there, from The Secret. He said, Mark, always leave every situation and person with the impression of increase for you being there. So you've added some value, you've done something positive in that moment. And I think if we all do that, I mean, it's utopia, right? But if we all do that, actually, you'll start to see better results. But it's down to personal choice. I can't tell anybody to do that. I can't force anybody. I would never do that. It's very much about each individual choosing to do that and therefore making a positive difference. So yeah, there is hope. There's plenty of hope and positive expectation towards the fact that we can all succeed. But it has to be down to the individual.
Yeah, the book, one thing which I thought was very interesting in the book, because sometimes these concepts can be dealt with in quite an abstract way, and it can come across as quite high level. And, we're having this kind of inspirational chat, as it were, and it's kind of people think, well, how does this really pertain to what's actually going on in my life on the ground kind of thing. What I liked in the book, though, was you both have a lot of framing around your personal experiences. So, what do you think from those, what kind of using those personal experiences and things that you've learned, in your lives, how do you feel like that helps kind of get that message across? And Paul, I mean, obviously you've with your professional experience, how does that kind of feed through to what you're telling readers now?
I think I think one of the starting points in the book is uh, about understanding yourself and understanding others through, personality diversity. If you're going to build wealth, you're going to have to do it by interacting with people, and so that becomes one of the initial starting points. You really need to have a vision and have purposes, and have a way to add value, and goals and ethics that you're going to follow. Those are all some of the principles that, if you can do those and align yourself properly, then you can, continue down the road of building wealth. But I think you've got to be disciplined. You've got to follow budgets. You've got to live within your means. You've got to, prioritize things like needs, investing, and wants in the right order. Avoid bad debt and use delayed gratification, and avoid lifestyle creep. Those are all around discipline that you've got to follow. And then you can continue on. There's several other steps that are very important to building wealth.
I think part of that as well is very much about the income and net worth discussion, which is vitally important. Most people are just completely focused on income and getting by, rather than actually being able to look at the net worth as well. And then, yeah, that income is the key, right? We must have income to be able to make that work. So we've got to learn to do both, and actually straddle that situation, if you like.
Yeah, Mark, you mentioned earlier you kind of had some health struggles in your 30s, and that led to a kind of a change of direction in your kind of career and life. I mean, how important do you think health is to this story? I mean, I'm assuming extremely important, and your experience from that, obviously as difficult that was, has obviously ultimately helped you. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, a healthy body and a healthy mind. Both of those things must go hand in hand. Paul and I run a leadership session online globally every Tuesday morning, and we cover a lot of these subjects. It's very important that we understand ourselves and our mental and our physical health. Because if we don't understand these things, we can find ourselves stressed or frustrated or impatient or withdrawing or whatever it might be. And if we get those things wrong, you're not going to be able to build the wealth that you would like to be able to build. Yeah, it does. I remember Bob Proctor telling me this kind of information and sharing it with me. And I remember thinking, can't be that easy, can it really? I just got to maintain a positive mental attitude and just follow the instructions and I'll succeed, will I? Oh yeah, all right. And I remember thinking, if this is not true, I might write a book about the fact that it doesn't work. But actually, the key points are that Life Remixed, Money Remixed, and then the other books that are coming are all about the fact that it does work. And Paul was taught this stuff, from his parents and the people around him, probably from a very young age, whereas I was not guided that way. My father died when I was young, and all the stuff I've written about in Life Remixed. But here we are now, both at a similar age in our 50s, and we're here together with a very similar goal and outcome, that we really want to help as many people as possible overcome their challenges and live in a good way.
Yeah, I think there's
It's
a lot
interesting.
of. Oh, sorry, no, go on, Paul.
It's interesting you mention about the health, the health side, in terms of both a healthy body and a healthy mind. And if I look back over the last 30 odd years, the number of people that I've seen burn themselves out because they don't have the right, they don't have the right healthy body and healthy mind. So it is a very, very important issue. It's one of the 14 steps that we mention in the book.
Yeah, yeah. Well, on that, I think that's quite interesting. But particularly, we see movements like the fire movement. I don't. You guys have come across the kind of the retire. I mean, it's the retire early movement, but they some of the kind of the more intense versions of that are involve quite extreme savings strategies, and saving 80% of your income and that kind of thing to try and get to a point where you can retire and have all your money in markets and that kind of thing by the age of about 40, 45, depending on when you start. Is that for you guys, is that too extreme? Do we need to enjoy a little bit of our lives as well along the way, and in order to achieve that kind of, positive mental health, as well as kind of, directing towards those goals?
Oh,
It's an interesting point. In the book, we talk about your purposes in life. So one of my 8 purposes in life is guilt-free spending, and that's whereby you manage some of those pleasures in life. So you don't necessarily have to cut them out, but you have to manage them as part of the plan, where it's not going to cause you issues in the future.
So, just thinking about the book, and I know it's obviously difficult to kind of boil it down to kind of one thing. But if somebody were to take just a few things away from the book as a kind of a positive message, what would you guys think that should be? What would you like it to be?
I think discipline's one of the key things. Discipline in terms of establishing your vision and your purposes, where you can add value, goals, following your ethics, things like discipline around budgeting, and not allowing lifestyle creep to get you into a hole, and avoiding things like bad debt. Those to me, very much around the discipline part, is the key to really building financial wealth.
what I would add to that is discipline sometimes gets a bit of a bad rap, right? Because if we got disciplined at school, we were like, oh, it's bad. But actually, I think what we're talking about is self-discipline. Being disciplined in your own mind and your own body and everything else, and making good decisions in a positive way. And my takeaway for people, alongside obviously the other books we have coming and the Life Remixed, Money Remixed is very much about follow these steps, apply them to your own life. Don't just take our word for it, but apply them to your own life and then see the results. Once you start to see the results, and to be honest, when I started doing this 15 years ago, after off the back of the bankruptcy, I just started taking these little steps. I was getting coached by some really great people, and I just started taking these little steps. And every single time I saw a little step and a little improvement, I went, "Oh, that's good. I'll do some more of that then." And it just grew and grew and grew and grew until here we are today, looking at multiple books, global businesses, happy marriage, happy wife, all that good stuff. All of that comes together once you do the work on yourself, and that is the message I believe from the whole Remix series is know thyself.
Yeah. So we're not going to obviously not going to give away the specific steps that are in the book. People are going to have to go and pick up a copy in order to do that. I don't think Paul and Mark would thank me if I did. So I think that's probably for me the takeaway is there are some really interesting and I think I really like that being able to, and we've talked about this on the podcast before, breaking this kind of stuff down into manageable challenges, right? Not making it look like it's something that's such a massive, it's not about climbing Everest, it's about getting to base camp and then, where do you go from there kind of thing. Do you think that's fair?
A lot of people get overwhelmed quite quickly. When they start to think about their whole life and all their finances, and some of them are in a mess and everything's everywhere. It's not gonna help you getting overwhelmed at all. In fact, the whole piece is, calm down to speed up. He's very much like pause, steady. Okay, let's have a look around. Let's get a bit more organized. Let's work on our thoughts and feelings. Let's make sure that that is reflecting our actions and everything's aligned for us as a human being. We're doing what we love to do and we're making good money at it. These are great things to be doing for any human being. So it's a journey. Overwhelm won't help. And hopefully what we've achieved here is very much about breaking it down into steps and giving people, very clear instructions about things that have worked for us. And because they've worked for us, we want to share that and say, well, look, here's some value for you as the reader or the listener to the audiobook. Here's some value. Now go and test it out for yourself and let us know how you get on. I remember my original coach, Bob Proctor, he said, it works for every person every time. I'm not going to necessarily say that quite like that. But what I am going to say is if you follow these steps and you do this work, it's worked for Paul and I, so therefore it can work for you.
Oh, just before I tell, we tell people listening or watching indeed because we're on YouTube as well, where to pick up a copy of the book. What was the tell? Oh, you've alluded a few times there to the books that are coming up. There's two, isn't there? Do you want to just give us a little bit of a preview of what's coming in those?
Yeah, so we have the Personalities Remixed, which is now at the editors and due to be launched end of June. And the next book after that will be Business Remixed, which we expect to launch at the end of this year as well.
So some well, the business sounds, I think, potentially for anybody, yeah, wanting to kind of go down that independent route, certainly interesting, and then personalities as well. We shall keep an eye out for it.
Edmund as well.
Yeah, go on, Mark.
Can I just add to
Yeah, of
that? So
course.
the whole definition of a remix, I think, is quite important as well. A
Yeah.
remix is, when I worked in recording studios and remixed David Bowie and Lou Reed and stuff like that, you get sent all the parts to a remix, and then you take the parts that you like and you make something new. And that's what this is about. This is what our whole process is about: is finding out the bits that you like about you and keeping them and playing them and making sure they're a positive outcome for you, and finding the bits that are perhaps holding you back or not or causing you problems, and working on taking those away for you so they no longer hold you back. And that's the whole thing about any remix, musically in a studio, is that's what it's about. It's not wholesale change, got to change, no, it's great things about you. Let's realize that potential and bring out more of that, you know, and let's just make sure we leave a few bits that we don't, you know, on the cutting room floor or whatever you want to call it, you know, but let's remix, you know, let's remix ourselves and our lives. It does work.
So just before we finish then, if anybody in the audience wants to pick up a copy of this one or your earlier works, wants to keep an eye out for the ones that are coming up, where's the best place to go and grab a copy?
Well, they can absolutely go to markwilkinsonofficial.com to get all various pieces of information. And there is a shop on there, which I'll be adding Money Remixed to shortly. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all other good online bookstores. But those are the best places to get it currently. Yeah, we are very comfortable. Things are moving along well, and there's some great reviews starting to appear on Amazon already. So we're very, very grateful for that.
Brilliant. We'll also pop some links on the show notes as well for anybody who's interested in having a look. So no problem there. I think that about wraps us up. I think it's really, really interesting story you've both had to tell. The book itself is full of really, really useful insights, and I think really core to what we're trying to do as well, about having that conversation about wealth and why it matters, and why actually we shouldn't shy away from these kind of conversations. Mark and Paul, thank you both for joining me. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. It's been great to be here, Evan.
Thanks for inviting us.
We look forward to seeing more in the future too. Thank you everybody for listening as ever, and catch us again soon. We'll see you then. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into the Mouthy Money podcast. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe on all our content. Follow us for more on your preferred podcasting channel, including Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcasts. Stay in touch by following our social channels on Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. And don't forget to subscribe to the Mouthy Money newsletter on mouthymoney.co.uk. The Mouthy Money podcast is produced for general informational purposes only. It should not be construed as investment, legal, tax, or other forms of financial advice. If in any doubt about the themes expressed, consider consulting with a regulated financial professional for your own personal situation. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Investments can go down as well as up, and you may get back less than you started with. Never invest more than you can afford to lose. For more information, visit fca.org.uk/investsmart for more. Thank you.